The stars screamed in silence as another ship exploded in the darkness of space. Commander Jake Sullivan watched from the bridge of the UES Liberty as red and blue lights flashed across his screen. Each light was a ship. Each flash meant someone had died. The war between the Zephyrians and the Keth had been going on for 3,000 years. 3,000 years of the same thing over and over. The blue ships would line up in perfect rows. The red ships would face them. They would shoot at each other until one side pulled back. Then they would do it all again somewhere else. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the tactical display. The Zephyrian Empire controlled the left side of the galaxy. The Keth Dominion owned the right side. Between them lay a strip of dead worlds where nothing grew anymore. That strip got wider every year. "Sir, Admiral Rodriguez wants to see you," said Communications Officer Amy Chun. She was young, maybe 25, with black hair tied back in a regulation bun. Like most humans on the ship, she looked confused by what they were watching. Jake walked through the narrow corridors of the Liberty. The ship was small compared to the alien vessels around them. Human technology was still new. Earth had only been in space for 200 years. The aliens had been flying between stars since before humans discovered fire. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood in the war room, staring at a huge map of the galaxy. Red dots showed Keth positions. Blue dots marked Zephyrian fleets. Tiny green dots represented human ships. There were not many green dots. "Jake, come look at this," Lisa said without turning around. She was a tough woman in her 50s with gray hair and scars on her hands from her early days as a pilot. The Keth just broke through the Zephyrian line at Sector 7. Jake looked at the map. A cluster of red dots had pushed past a line of blue ones. How many ships did they lose? About 40% of their attack force. And the Zephyrians? 30%. Jake shook his head. Those are terrible losses for such a small gain. "That's what I thought too, but look at this." Lisa pointed to another part of the map. The Keth could have kept pushing. They had the advantage. But they stopped here and sent a message to the Zephyrians. What kind of message? They're giving them 3 days to regroup and prepare a counterattack. Something about maintaining honor in battle. Jake stared at the map. They're letting their enemies get ready to fight them again? That's right. It's part of their ancient war codes. Both sides follow the same rules. No surprise attacks on certain holy days. No fighting near civilian worlds without warning first. No pushing an advantage if the enemy needs time to regroup. Captain Ryan Torres entered the room. He was a former Marine, built like a tank, with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. He had been studying the alien war for months. "Admiral, I've been watching their patterns. This isn't really a war. It's more like a big, deadly game." Lisa turned to face him. "Explain." Ryan moved to the map and pointed at different battle sites. "Look at how they fight. The Zephyrians always put their heavy ships in the center and light ships on the wings. Always. The Keth always respond by concentrating their attack on the left wing first, then moving to the center. Every single time. So neither side ever tries anything different. They've been using the same tactics for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. They're not trying to win. They're just following tradition." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. "How many people die in each battle?" Ryan checked his notes. "Usually between 10 and 20,000 on each side." "And how often do they fight?" "About once a month." Jake did the math in his head. 20 to 40,000 dead every month for 3,000 years. The number was too big to understand. Billions of lives lost for what? Tradition. Amy Chun appeared in the doorway. "Sirs, we're getting a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship." The main screen flickered to life. A tall, thin alien with blue skin and 4 arms appeared. This was Admiral Kethvar, commander of the Zephyrian Third Fleet. He wore elaborate robes covered in symbols that showed his rank and family history. "Human vessels," Kethvar said in perfect English. The aliens had learned human languages quickly. "You will maintain your position and observe only. This conflict does not concern your species. You are here to learn from civilized warfare, the transmission ended. Civilized warfare, Ryan muttered. Right, Lisa looked at her officers. I know what you're thinking. But we're not here to change anything. The Galactic Council was very clear. We observe. We learn. We don't interfere. Jake understood the politics. Humanity was new to galactic society. They had to prove themselves worthy of respect. The older species saw humans as children playing with dangerous toys. Earth's technology was primitive compared to what the Zephyrians and Keth could build, but something bothered him about the whole situation. Back on Earth, wars ended when one side won or both sides got tired of fighting. They didn't go on for thousands of years with the same people using the same tactics and getting the same results. Admiral, Jake said carefully, what if there was a better way? Lisa gave him a sharp look. A better way to do what? To end this war? What if someone could break the pattern? The pattern has existed for 3,000 years, Commander. Two of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy have been fighting this way since before humans existed. I don't think they need advice from us. Ryan Torres was studying the tactical display again. With respect, Admiral, advanced doesn't always mean smart. Sometimes it just means old. Before Lisa could respond, alarms started going off. Amy's voice came over the intercom. All senior officers to the bridge. The Keth are moving toward the Centauri Nebula. The Zephyrians are preparing to intercept. They rushed to the bridge and watched as hundreds of ships began moving across space like pieces on a chessboard. The Keth fleet formed up in their traditional attack formation. The Zephyrians arranged themselves in their standard defensive pattern. Jake watched the two fleets approach each other with growing frustration. He could see at least 5 ways the Keth could outflank the Zephyrian position. He could think of 3 tactics the Zephyrians could use to turn the Keth formation against itself. But neither side would try anything new. Look at that, Ryan said quietly. The Keth have a perfect opportunity to hit the Zephyrian supply ships. But they won't do it because those ships aren't part of the battle formation. It's not considered honorable. Amy shook her head. This is insane. They're fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. Both hands, Jake corrected. And they tied them there themselves. The battle began exactly as Ryan had predicted. The Keth hit the left wing first. The Zephyrians held the center. Ships exploded. People died. After 6 hours, the Keth pulled back according to schedule. The Zephyrians let them go according to tradition. Nothing had changed. Nothing ever changed. Jake looked around the bridge at his fellow humans. They all had the same expression on their faces. It was the look of people watching something that made no sense at all. Outside, the alien fleets began moving back to their bases. Tomorrow they would count their dead, repair their ships, and prepare to do the same thing again next month. And the month after that? And the month after that. For 3,000 more years if no one did something different. The emergency alarm woke Jake Sullivan from a restless sleep. He pulled on his uniform and ran to the bridge, where Amy Chun was already at her station, her face pale in the glow of the communication screens. What's happening? Jake asked. The Keth launched a surprise attack on Haven Prime, Amy said. It's an agricultural world with about 2 million civilians. Zephyrians are sending their defense fleet, but it will take them 12 hours to get there. Jake looked at the tactical display. Haven Prime was a green and blue world that grew food for half the sector. It had no military value except as a symbol. The Keth attacking it meant they wanted to hurt Zephyrian pride more than capture anything. Useful, Admiral Rodriguez arrived on the bridge still putting on her jacket. Status report. The Keth have about 50 ships in orbit around Haven Prime, Amy said. They're not bombing the planet yet. They sent a message saying they want the Zephyrians to come fight them properly. Of course they did, Ryan Torres said. From behind them. He had been studying battle reports in the tactical room. It's another formal challenge. The Keth will wait for the Zephyrians to arrive. Then they'll have their traditional battle in orbit while 2 million people watch from below. Lisa Rodriguez rubbed her forehead. How long will a traditional siege last? Based on past patterns, about 8 months, Ryan said. Maybe longer if both sides really dig in. Jake felt sick. 8 months of fighting over a farming world while people tried to live normal lives below. Children going to school while ships exploded overhead. Farmers trying to harvest crops while debris fell from space battles. "Admiral," Jake said, "we could help evacuate the civilians." "Our orders are to observe only," Lisa replied. "We're not supposed to interfere in their war." "This isn't interfering in their war," Ryan said. "This is helping innocent people who aren't part of the fight." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at the display showing Haven Prime. "How many ships do we have in the area?" "Just the Liberty and the Freedom," Amy said. "Captain Torres commands the Freedom." "Ryan, how fast could you get your ship to Haven Prime?" 6 hours if we push the engines hard." Lisa made her decision. "Take the Freedom to Haven Prime. Your official mission is to observe and document the battle. Unofficially, if you see opportunities to help civilians, use your judgment," Ryan grinned. "Yes, ma'am." 3 hours later, Jake was aboard the UES Freedom as it dropped out of hyperspace near Haven Prime. The planet looked peaceful from space, but the sensors showed Keth ships in perfect formation around it. They were waiting, just as Ryan had predicted. "Sir," said Chief Engineer Sam Parker over the intercom, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from those Keth ships. They could level the planet if they wanted to, but they won't," Ryan said. "That would be dishonorable. They'll wait for the Zephyrians to arrive, then fight a proper battle." Jake shook his head. "Proper according to who?" "According to rules that are older than human civilization," Ryan replied. "But sometimes old rules don't make sense anymore." The Freedom moved closer to the planet. On the main screen, Jake could see cities and farmland, rivers and forests. It looked a lot like Earth. Down there, people were probably scared, not knowing what would happen to them. "Captain," said Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, Ryan's second-in-command, "I'm getting communications from the surface. The planetary government is asking for help with evacuations." "What kind of help?" Ryan asked. "They have evacuation ships, but they're afraid to use the main spaceports. The Keth ships are watching those areas closely." Ryan thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "Sam, how many shuttles do we have?" "6, sir." "Small ones. Perfect. Maria, get me Dr. Alex Johnson. Tell him to prep the medical bay for refugees." Over the next few hours, Jake watched Captain Torres do something no alien commander would ever think of. Instead of following the expected patterns, Ryan sent the Freedom's shuttles to unexpected places on Haven Prime's surface, while the Keth watched the main spaceports. Human shuttles landed at abandoned mining sites in the mountains. They touched down at farming settlements near the ocean. They even landed underwater at old research stations, using human diving equipment to reach places the aliens couldn't access easily. "The Keth are getting confused," Amy reported from the communications station. "They keep asking us what we're doing." "What are you telling them?" Ryan asked. "That we're conducting scientific surveys of the planet's surface." "It's technically true." Each shuttle trip brought back 50 or 60 refugees. They were mostly families with children, old people who couldn't travel fast, and anyone else who needed extra help. Dr. Johnson and his medical team worked around the clock, treating injuries and helping people who were scared and tired. The refugees were amazed by human efficiency. "How do you move so fast?" asked an elderly Zephyrian farmer. "Your shuttles land, load people, and take off again in minutes. Our evacuation ships take hours to prepare for each trip. We don't follow a script," Dr. Johnson explained while treating the farmer's injured arm. "We just do what makes sense." Meanwhile, Sergeant Pete Williams and his squad of Marines were doing something even more unusual. They had taken one of the shuttles down to the planet's surface and were moving around on foot, scouting Keth positions. "Sir," Pete reported over the radio, "the Keth have supply depots scattered around the planet." "They're not heavily guarded?" "Because they assumed no one would attack them during the formal waiting period." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "Just sharing information, sir. What you do with that information is up to you," Jake realized what Pete meant. The Keth had supplies sitting undefended because their honor code said enemies wouldn't attack during preparation time. But humans had never agreed to follow that honor code. "Ryan," Jake said quietly, "we could end this battle before it starts." "How?" "Hit their supply depots. Without supplies, they can't maintain a siege. They'd have to leave." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "That would be interfering in their war, would it?" "We're not fighting for either side. We're just protecting innocent people." The Keth would call it dishonorable. "The Keth are threatening to start an 8-month battle over a farming world." Jake replied, "I'm not sure they get to talk about honor." Before Ryan could respond, Maria Santos spoke up from the tactical station. "Sir, the Zephyrian fleet just arrived. They're taking up defensive positions around the planet." On the main screen, Jake watched dozens of blue ships arrange themselves in traditional patterns facing the red Keth vessels. Both fleets were now in position for their formal battle. Soon they would start shooting at each other while 2 million civilians watched from below unless someone changed the rules. "Pete," Ryan said into his radio, "how long would it take to disable those supply depots? Maybe 2 hours, sir." "They're just sitting there undefended." Ryan looked around the bridge at his crew. These were people who had followed him through corporate wars on Earth, where survival mattered more than tradition. They understood that sometimes you had to break the rules to do the right thing. "Do it," Ryan said. 2 hours later, explosions lit up the night sky on Haven Prime's surface. The Keth supply depots erupted in flames one after another. Within minutes, the Keth fleet was receiving reports that they had lost most of their fuel, food, and ammunition. The alien commanders on both sides were stunned. This had never happened before. Someone had broken the ancient rules of war. "Sir," Amy said, trying not to smile, "we're receiving very angry messages from the Keth fleet commander. He says we violated every principle of civilized warfare." "Tell him we're not part of his war," Ryan replied. "We're just protecting innocent people." By morning, the Keth fleet was gone. Without supplies, they couldn't maintain their position. The planned 8-month siege had lasted less than 24 hours. Haven Prime was safe. Jake looked out at the peaceful planet below and smiled. Sometimes the old rules needed to be broken. The emergency meeting was called 3 days after Haven Prime. Jake Sullivan sat in the large council chamber aboard the neutral station Harmony Point, watching alien diplomats argue in languages he barely understood. The translation devices made their angry words clear enough. "The humans have violated every law of civilized warfare," declared Admiral Kethver of the Zephyrian Empire. His blue skin was darker than usual, which Jake had learned meant he was very angry. "They attacked during a sacred preparation period." "We did not attack anyone," Admiral Rodriguez replied calmly. "We protected innocent civilians and disabled enemy supply depots that were threatening a peaceful world." "The Keth representative?" War leader Vexthal slammed his clawed hand on the table. "You broke the ancient codes. These rules have kept our war honorable for 3,000 years." Jake looked around the room at the assembled alien leaders. They all looked confused and upset, like children whose favorite game had been ruined by someone who refused to follow the rules. But the rules of their game killed thousands of people every month. Council mediator Veltar, an ancient being whose species was older than both the Zephyrians and Keth, spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. "The humans must explain their actions. Their behavior threatens the stability of our region." Admiral Rodriguez stood up. She looked small compared to the tall aliens around her, but her voice was strong. "Our actions saved 2 million innocent lives and ended a conflict that would have lasted 8 months. How is that threatening stability?" "Because you changed the pattern," Veltar replied. "The pattern maintains balance." The pattern maintains death," Captain Torres said from his seat beside Jake. "Your balance is built on graves." The room erupted. In angry voices, several alien delegates stood up, their various appendages waving in gestures Jake assumed were insulting. One of the Keth representatives started what sounded like a formal challenge to combat. Valtar raised one thin hand and the room fell silent. Captain Torres will explain human tactics to this assembly. We must understand what happened at Haven. Prime, Ryan Torres walked to the center of the room. He was surrounded by beings who could live for thousands of years, who commanded fleets that could destroy star systems, who had forgotten more about war than humans had ever learned. But he didn't look intimidated. You want to know what we did? Ryan asked. We ignored your rules and focused on results. While you were arranging your ships in pretty formations, we were saving lives. While you were following ancient traditions, we were solving problems. Solving problems? War leader Vexthal laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You destroyed military supplies without honor, without challenge, without warning. That is not solving problems. That is barbarism. No, Jake said, standing up. Barbarism is letting 2 million people suffer through an 8-month siege because you're too proud to fight efficiently. The room fell silent again. Jake realized he had just insulted some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But he was tired of watching people die for no good reason. Dr. Rebecca Turner, the human xenopsychologist, had been quiet during the meeting. Now she stood up and walked to a wall display. May I show you something? Valtar nodded. Rebecca activated the display, showing a map of the galaxy with thousands of red dots marking battle sites. This shows every major engagement between the Zephyrians and Keth over the past 1,000 years. The dots formed patterns across space like a deadly constellation. Now watch this, Rebecca said. The display changed, showing the same battles, but with time indicators. The battles happened in the same places, using the same tactics, with the same results. Over and over, she changed the display again. This is the cost in lives. Numbers appeared next to each battle site. The total was staggering. Your war isn't about territory or resources or ideology, Rebecca continued. It's about maintaining tradition. You're not fighting to win. You're fighting to keep fighting. War leader Vexthal's eyes narrowed. You dare judge our sacred traditions? I dare judge any tradition that serves no purpose except killing people, Rebecca replied. Admiral Kethver stood up slowly. Our traditions preserve honor. They prevent total war. Without the codes, both our species would have destroyed each other long ago. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe you would have ended the war centuries ago if you had actually tried to win it. Before anyone could respond, Amy Chun's voice came over Admiral Rodriguez's communicator. Ma'am, urgent message from the Outer Rim. The Deathsworn have taken Crossroads Station. The alien delegates looked at each other with what Jake was beginning to recognize as fear. The Deathsworn were a Keth splinter group that had rejected all the traditional rules. They fought without honor, without codes, without mercy. How many hostages? Valtar asked. 50,000 civilians, Amy reported. They're demanding territorial concessions from both the Empire and the Dominion. They say they'll start executing hostages in 3 days if their demands aren't met. The room erupted in panicked conversation. This was exactly what the ancient codes were supposed to prevent. But now it was happening anyway. We must respond according to protocol, Admiral Kethver said. Begin siege preparations, establish containment, follow proper procedures for hostage situations. How long will that take? Admiral Rodriguez asked. Standard procedure calls for a minimum 3-month preparation period. War leader Vexthal replied, We cannot risk civilian lives by acting hastily. Jake stared at him. 3 months? They'll kill the hostages in 3 days. Then we will mourn them with honor and proceed with the siege, Vexthal said. You're going to let 50,000 people die because it would be improper to save them quickly? Ryan Torres asked. We will not abandon our principles, Admiral. Kethver replied. Without honor, we are no better than the Deathsworn themselves. Jake looked around the room at the alien leaders. They were all nodding in agreement. They would rather let 50,000 innocent people die than break their ancient rules. They were so trapped by tradition that they couldn't see any other way to act, but humans could see another way. Admiral, Jake said to Rodriguez, request. Permission to assist in the rescue operation. Denied, Valtar said immediately. This is not a human concern. Your interference at Haven Prime was already inappropriate. We will not allow you to corrupt this situation as well. Admiral Rodriguez stood up. Then we request permission to leave this meeting and return to our ships. Permission granted, Veltar said. But you will not interfere with proper military operations. Of course not, Rodriguez replied with a straight face. As the humans filed out of the meeting room, Jake heard the aliens beginning to plan their 3-month siege preparation. They would follow every rule, observe every tradition, and honor every code while 50,000 innocent people died, but humans had never agreed to follow alien rules. In the corridor outside the meeting room, Admiral Rodriguez gathered her officers. Jake, get me a complete tactical analysis of Crossroads Station. Ryan, I want you to identify every person in your crew who volunteers for dangerous missions. Rebecca, find out everything you can about the Death Sworn. Ma'am, Amy said quietly, the aliens specifically told us not to interfere. They told us not to interfere with proper military operations, Rodriguez replied with a small smile. What we're planning isn't proper by their standards, which means it should work. Jake felt a familiar excitement building in his chest. It was the same feeling he had gotten at Haven Prime when they decided to ignore the rules and save lives. The aliens could follow their ancient codes and lose 50,000 hostages. Humans were going to save them instead. Crossroads Station hung in space like a massive metal city. Jake Sullivan studied the tactical display showing the huge trading post, where 50,000 innocent people were trapped with terrorists who had already proven they didn't care about rules or honor. The Death Sworn have weapons pointed at the civilian quarters, reported Major Kelly Thompson. The intelligence officer Colonel Martinez had assigned to the rescue mission. They've rigged explosives throughout the station. 1. Wrong move and everyone dies. Colonel Frank Martinez stood at the center of the war room aboard the UES Freedom, surrounded by humans, Zephyrians, and Keth who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission any of them had ever attempted. 3 species that had never worked together before were about to try something that had never been done. How many Death Sworn are we dealing with? Martinez asked. About 200 fighters, Kelly replied. They're spread throughout the station, but most of them are concentrated near the main docking bays and the command center. Captain Tony Richardson, leader of the Human Special Forces team, studied the station's blueprints. The docking bays are obvious targets. They'll expect us to come in that way. Which is why we won't, said Melthara, a Zephyrian stealth specialist whose blue skin could change color to match her surroundings. My people can approach through the maintenance sections. The Death Sworn will not expect an attack from inside the station's infrastructure. Vexrun, a Keth warrior whose species was famous for their combat skills, flexed his clawed hands. My squad can handle the frontal assault. Let the Death Sworn focus on us while you move through the hidden passages. Jake watched the planning session with amazement. 3 days ago, these species had been ready to fight each other. Now they were working together to save lives. The change had happened because of one simple thing. They had a common enemy who threatened innocent people. The biggest problem is coordination, said communications specialist Lucy Davis. Zephyrian combat language is very formal and detailed. Keth battle speech is quick and aggressive. Human tactical communication is somewhere in between. Can you make them work together? Martinez asked. Lucy nodded. I think so. Human communication protocols can serve as a bridge between the other two. We'll use our language as the common link. The plan that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of one large assault, they would hit the station from multiple directions at the same time. Zephyrian stealth teams would disable the explosives. Keth warriors would draw the enemy's attention with aggressive attacks. Human special forces would rescue the hostages using techniques neither alien species had ever seen. Remember, Martinez told the assembled teams, we're not trying to follow anyone's rules of combat. We're trying to save lives. If something works, we do it. If it doesn't work, we try something else. No traditions, no codes, no honor except the honor of bringing innocent people home alive. The mission began 18 hours before the Death Sworn deadline. While Zephyrian and Keth fleets created a distraction with traditional fleet movements, the real rescue force approached Crossroads Station using methods that defied every military textbook in the galaxy. Captain Richardson led his team through space using human zero-gravity combat gear. Instead of docking at the main bays, they attached themselves to the station's outer hull and cut through maintenance hatches that the Death-Sworn hadn't even thought to guard. "We're inside," Richardson reported over the radio, moving toward the civilian quarters. At the same time, Malthara and her Zephyrian team were crawling through the station's air ducts and power conduits. Their natural stealth abilities, combined with human-designed detection equipment, made them nearly invisible to the Death-Sworn sensors. "Explosives located," Malthara whispered, beginning disarmament procedures. A Keth assault team, led by Vexron, made their entrance in the most direct way possible. They blasted through the main docking bay doors and immediately began a fierce firefight with Death-Sworn defenders. "Enemy forces concentrating on our position," Vexron reported, his voice calm despite the sounds of battle in the background. "The distraction is working." Lucy Davis coordinated the entire operation from the Freedom's Communications Center. She was handling radio traffic from 3 different species, each with their own way of talking about combat and somehow making it all work together. "Richardson, you have 15 Death-Sworn moving toward your position from the East Corridor," she reported. "Malthara, can you create a diversion?" "Understood. Shutting down power to that section now." The lights went out in the East Corridor just as Captain Richardson's team reached the civilian quarters. Using night vision equipment that the Death-Sworn didn't have, the humans moved through the darkness like ghosts. "First group of hostages secured," Richardson reported. 200 civilians heading to Extraction Point Alpha. The rescue proceeded faster than anyone had expected. By working together, the 3 species could do things that none of them could accomplish alone. Zephyrian precision disabled the Death-Sworn's defenses. Keth aggression kept the terrorists busy fighting instead of killing hostages. Human adaptability found solutions to problems that hadn't been in any of their planning, but the Death-Sworn weren't helpless. They had prepared for a traditional siege, not for this kind of coordinated assault. Their leader, a scarred Keth named Drakmer who had rejected all honor codes, realized his situation was hopeless. "If we cannot win," he told his followers over their communication system, "then we will make them pay for their victory." Drakmer ordered his remaining fighters to begin executing hostages. The race was now between the rescue teams and the terrorists. Desperation. "Multiple hostage executions in progress," Kelly Thompson reported grimly. "Sectors 7 through 12. "Malthara, can you reach those sectors?" Martinez asked. "Negative. Too much distance and too many Death-Sworn in the way." "Vexron, my people are pinned down." "The Death-Sworn are fighting like cornered animals." Jake felt his heart sink. They had come so close to a perfect rescue. Now innocent people were dying while they could do nothing to stop it. Then Captain Richardson's voice came over the radio with words that would be remembered for generations. "This is Tony Richardson. I'm in Sector 7. The executions stop now." What happened next became legend among the rescue teams. Richardson and his squad didn't use traditional military tactics. They didn't follow rules of engagement. They simply moved through the station, like a force of nature, arriving wherever hostages were in danger and eliminating the threat before moving to the next crisis. Sector 7 secured, moving to Sector 8. Sector 8 secured, moving to Sector 9. All hostages in the northern section are safe, moving south. By the time the sun rose on a distant star, the impossible had been accomplished. Crossroads Station was secure. The Death-Sworn were defeated, and 48,000 of the 50,000 hostages were alive and safe. The cost had been amazingly low. 12 Keth warriors, 8 Zephyrian specialists, and 3 human special forces soldiers had died in the assault. It was a tragedy, but it was also a miracle. Traditional siege warfare would have taken months and cost thousands of lives. As Jake watched the rescued civilians being evacuated to safety, He realized that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Three species had worked together to achieve the impossible. They had proven that cooperation was stronger than tradition, that innovation was more powerful than ancient rules. The war between the Zephyrians and Keth wasn't over yet. But for the first time in 3,000 years, there was hope that it could end with victory instead of endless stalemate. 6 months after Crossroads Station, Jake Sullivan walked through the corridors of the first Interspecies Military Academy. Young officers from dozens of worlds studied together in classrooms where ancient enemies learned to fight as allies. The sight still amazed him. "Commander Sullivan," called out a voice behind him. Jake turned to see Lieutenant Zethmore, a young Zephyrian officer whose blue skin showed the excitement patterns of his species. "General White wants to see you in the simulation room." Jake followed the lieutenant through halls filled with the sounds of different languages mixing together. Keth warriors practiced human-style stealth techniques. Zephyrian pilots learned Keth-aggressive flying maneuvers. Human Marines taught both species how to think quickly and adapt to changing situations. General Patricia White stood before a massive holographic display showing a fleet exercise. Ships from 3 different species moved through space in formations. That would have been impossible just a year ago. Mixed crews worked together as if they had been doing it for centuries instead of months. "Jake, look at this," Patricia said, pointing to the display. "The new tactics are spreading faster than we ever imagined. Even species that weren't part of the original conflict are asking to learn our methods." On the display, Jake watched a joint fleet respond to a simulated crisis. Instead of the rigid formations he had seen in the old war, the ships moved like a living thing, adapting instantly to new threats and opportunities. "How are the traditionalists taking it?" Jake asked. Patricia's expression grew serious. "Not. Well, Admiral Kethver tried to have me assassinated last week. He says I'm destroying thousands of years of military honor." "And the Keth hardliners?" War leader Vexthal challenged Commander Julia Roberts to single combat. He said her mixed species tactics were cowardice disguised as innovation. Jake shook his head. Change was never easy, especially when it meant abandoning traditions that had defined entire civilizations. But the results spoke for themselves. The new integrated forces were achieving things that had been impossible under the old system. "Sir," said a voice from the communications station. "Priority message from Admiral Rodriguez. The Void Mines have launched their assault on the core worlds." Jake felt his blood go cold. The Void Mines were an artificial intelligence collective that had been building their strength in the galaxy's outer rim for decades. Unlike the Zephyrians and Keth, they didn't follow any rules except efficiency. They converted entire worlds into computer processing centers, eliminating all biological life in the process. "How many ships?" Patricia asked. "Estimated 10,000 vessels," the communications officer replied. "They're moving toward the Centauri system." Jake looked at the tactical display as red dots appeared by the thousands. The Void Mines had waited until the galaxy was weakened by the long war between organic species. Now they were making their move to claim everything. "Traditional military doctrine says we need at least 6 months to organize a proper response," Patricia said. The old alliance structures would require formal negotiations, treaty discussions, and careful planning. "How long do we have before they reach Centauri?" Jake asked. 8 weeks. Admiral Carlos Rivera's voice came over the communication system from his flagship, the UES Determination. "All integrated fleet commanders, this is Admiral Rivera. We're implementing immediate response protocols. Any ship that can fight is invited to join the defense fleet. No formal treaties required. No alliance paperwork. If you want to stop the Void Mines, meet us at the staging area." What happened next would have been impossible under the old system. Ships from dozens of species appeared at the staging area within days. Captains who had never met before worked together as if they had been fighting side by side for years. The new tactics that had been developed at the academy spread through the fleet like wildfire. Jake found himself aboard Admiral Rivera's flagship, as the combined fleet moved toward the Void Mind invasion force. The bridge crew included humans, Zephyrians, Keth, and half a dozen other species. They communicated in the mixed tactical language that had evolved from the Crossroads rescue. "Enemy fleet in sensor range," reported Navigator Sophie Turner from her station. "They're in perfect geometric formations. No wasted movement, no inefficient positioning. Just like a computer would arrange them," Jake observed. Admiral Rivera studied the tactical display. The Void Mine ships moved with mechanical precision, following calculated patterns that maximized their firepower and minimized their vulnerabilities. They were efficient, logical, and completely predictable. "They're fighting like the old Zephyrian and Keth fleets," Rivera said with a smile. "Perfect formations, traditional tactics, no adaptation to unexpected situations." "Sir," said Tactical Officer Ben Carter, "they're not expecting us to break the rules because they don't understand that rules can be broken." The battle began exactly as the Void Mines had calculated it would. Their formation engaged the Allied fleet in what appeared to be a traditional space battle. Energy weapons fired in precise patterns. Ships maneuvered according to established tactical doctrine. Everything proceeded logically. Then the Allies stopped following logic. Human ships used guerrilla tactics that the Void Mines couldn't predict. Zephyrian vessels employed stealth techniques in ways that violated traditional doctrine. Keth warriors ignored their own safety to protect ships from other species, creating bonds of trust that the artificial intelligences couldn't compute. "The enemy formation is showing stress patterns," Sophie reported. "They're trying to adapt. But their programming doesn't allow for truly random behavior." Jake watched as the battle evolved into something that had never been seen before. Instead of two sides fighting according to predetermined rules, it became a dance of improvisation and creativity. Every time the Void Mines calculated a response to human tactics, the Zephyrians would do something unexpected. When the artificial intelligences adapted to Zephyrian methods, the Keth would attack from an impossible angle. The turning point came when Captain Lisa Hayes, commanding a mixed-species task force, led a charge directly through the center of the Void Mine formation. It was a move that should have been suicidal according to every military textbook ever written. But it worked because it was so completely illogical that the Void Mines couldn't predict or counter it. "Enemy command ship destroyed," Ben Carter reported as Hayes' task force emerged from the other side of the enemy formation. "The Void Mine fleet is losing coordination." Without their central coordination, the artificial intelligence ships began making individual decisions. But they had been programmed for collective action, not independent thought. Their perfect formation collapsed into chaos. The battle that military experts said would take months was over in 6 days. The Void Mine threat was ended not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through the simple power of unpredictability. As Jake watched the surviving enemy ships retreat toward the outer rim, he realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The ancient war between the Zephyrians and Keth had officially ended not with surrender or conquest, but with the recognition that they faced challenges too large for any single species to handle alone. 3 years later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic defense platform, watching ships from hundreds of worlds work together to explore regions of space that had been too dangerous for any single species to investigate. Captain Sophie Turner's exploration fleet had made contact with peaceful alien civilizations that had been hiding from the old warlike galaxy. New worlds were being settled by mixed populations who saw species differences as strengths rather than reasons for conflict. Admiral Rodriguez, now serving as the first human member of the Galactic Strategic Command, joined Jake at the observation window. "Do you ever miss the old days?" she asked. Jake thought about the question. The old days of endless war, rigid traditions, and meaningless death. The days when species fought each other instead of working together. The days when rules mattered more than results. "No," he said simply. "I don't miss them at all." Outside the window, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 worlds where beings from different species lived and worked together. The war that had seemed unstoppable was over. The rules had been rewritten, and the galaxy was better for it.